Hello and welcome to our broadcast of round 2 of the 2024 Track Stars Touring Car Series, where we'll be bringing you all of the action from the Monza Sprint, from the Temple of Speed, the Autodromo Nazionale Monza. This week we swap out a daunting and technical Nürburgring for a full throttle blast at Monza, one of the fastest circuits on the calendar. That is to say that it won't be any less challenging for our drivers as they try to use every bit of tarmac and a little bit more to try and extract every thousandth of a second out of their lap times, taking on the risk of the track limits penalties if they push the boundaries just a little bit too far. Of course, our championship lead is up for grabs tonight as our round 1 winner and subsequently our championship leader in Liam Tame is absent tonight. So this means we will be definitely leaving Monza with a new championship leader. The likes of Green, Campbell, Ladaway and Ward will see this as a great opportunity to take an early lead and build a good haul of points early on. Of course, our reigning champion in Ridwan Hamza had a DNF and obviously a race to forget in round 1. And he'll be looking to get his title defence back on track with a strong showing here tonight. However, the competition is fierce this season and a number of drivers up and down pit lane could all put in a winning performance here at Monza. As we get closer to the start of the race, let's take a quick look at our circuit that the drivers will be racing on tonight. Of course, it is the Autodromo Nazionale Monza. And as you see, nearly 6 kilometres of action, a lot of lengthy straights, only 11 corners on the track, with the longest straight being 938 metres. Of course, we have our first chicane, the Variante della Rettifilo, a very tight chicane, a number of side-by-side battles, and of course a couple of drivers pushing the limits too far and getting involved in incidents. Then turn 3, the Curva Grande, long sweeping right-hander as they make the run to the Della Roggia chicane at turns 4 and 5. Of course, it's easy to trip yourself up there. And then the Lesmos 1, Lesmo 2, both very tricky right-handers trying to push the absolute maximum out of the cars. And very easy to run wide and find yourself into the gravel. Of course, another long blast down towards the Ascari chicane. And yet again, very easy to trip yourself up there. And very important to get a great exit as we head towards the Curva Parabolica, which is our final corner on the track. Of course, 2 races tonight, 22 laps is the duration, of course. And the race distance over 125 kilometres, with the total distance being 127.44 kilometres. Of course, we did not race here in 2023, but our last visit was a couple of seasons ago in 2022, where, of course, Pat Trappett was victorious here with his first ever Track Stars Touring Car Series round victory. And certainly put himself into championship contention early on in that season. Before we get into the race, of course, we'll take you through our qualifying results quickly. Unfortunately, we don't have some highlights there for you with some technical issues playing a role in that being unavailable. But of course, let's take a look at the qualifying results and of course the starting grid for our first race here tonight at Monza. And it is Ridwan Hamza who took pole position in a very close and tight qualifying session, with less than a tenth of a second separating himself and Green in the CP Motorsports Nissan. Row number 2 was Scott for WTC Racing and Patasso for Mash Spuds Racing. Row number 3, it's the CP Motorsports teammate of Campbell. And then Ladaway, who was a late recruit for the Kiwi Pit Lane Sim Racing team, taking 6th position in that one. And then our replacement for Liam Tame tonight in Atkinson. He is starting out of 7th with Ward for MC Motorsport, rounding out the 4th row of the grid. And the first 4 rows covered by nearly just a bit over half a second there. So very tight qualifying session here at Monza. And then as we jump over to the second page, it is Palmer and Crestel on row number 5. Then Von Duve making it 11 cars covered by less than a second. And then Sandwich just outside the 1 second barrier there in 12th place. And then our final row of the grid is Scott, who was the last of the qualifiers to set a time, with Westlake sitting in 14th after missing qualifying. So he'll have his work cut out for him here in the opening race here at Monza. So it looks like we're just about set to go racing, so we'll quickly jump over to the track here and bring you some footage of the racing ahead of us for the Monza Sprint as we get into race number 1. As you see, the cars are lined up on the grid. Lights about to come on for the start of the race. So here we go, the 5 lights going up as we get ready to start race number 1 here at the Monza Sprint. And we are underway here. A great start there from Hamza. He gets a perfect launch, and it's going to be a battle between Scott, Green and Patasso into turn 1. Who's going to be the last of the late breakers here? Green looks to have had the advantage here, gets himself on the inside for turn 2. But Patasso holding strong here on the outside, and that'll get him the inside through the Curva Grande, which he'll use perfectly to get ahead of Green here on the early stages of this race. So head towards turn 4 and 5. And Patasso jumping out into 2nd place over Green, and it's Scott Campbell there in 5th place. Looks like delivery hasn't loaded for that one, unfortunately. And it's Lewis Atkinson in 6th place, Justin Ladaway 7th, Ryan Palmer 8th, Ward in 9th. Then we've got Sandwich, Walker, Westlake, Von Duve and Crestel rounding out the field. But it is Hamza out to an early lead here in this 22 lap encounter, as Patasso and Green are chasing him furiously, trying to make sure that they can get into the toe of Hamza and maybe not let him get away quite so easily here in the first race. Patasso is also starting to build a bit of an advantage here over Green. Early on, Green probably just staying inside the slipstream. Let's get a bit further back. Campbell up into 4th place. Stop. As we see Lewis and Scott running side by side. But Lewis just getting ahead of Scott there. So definitely some nose-to-tail action here in the midfield. It's now Atkinson right on the tail of Campbell here. Isn't looking to make a move here though, just preferring to sit behind, not do as much battling. Maybe try and push Campbell a bit further up the order. Work together to get closer to the front pack. Meanwhile, in the background, just saw Scott and Ladaway. So Ladaway getting the job done there into the Parabolica. but that will leave him exposed here down the main straight as Ando tucks in right behind the rear wing of that Lexus RCF. Doesn't quite have enough speed to get the job done here into the first chicane. See a bit of contact there between Westlake and Sandwith there into the first chicane, and that's just dropped them back down the order. Just a little contact still going on between the two cars. Drivers maybe showing a little bit of their displeasure with each other over that incident. But at this early stage of the race, definitely not the time to get caught up in any small incidents. You certainly need to keep your eyes forward and focus on the race ahead and not let any previous incidents affect your current race ahead of you. So Campbell now down into the 7th place. Just washes up a bit wide there through the parabolica. And gets all out of shape there on the corner exit. Certainly not the exit onto the main straight that he would have wanted. And now Ward tucked in behind the rear wing looking for a slipstream. Pulls out of the draft. Moves towards the inside into turn 1. And Ward, he does get the job done here. And Campbell now, I think there was a bit of nose to tail contact through the chicane. And that's just allowed Palmer to also slot in ahead of him on the exit of the first chicane here. As they now run side by side into our second chicane, and again Campbell just losing out a bit there, and now Walker, or Scutt I should refer to him as, sorry, I've got the names a bit mixed up there from previous seasons. He's now moved ahead of Campbell as well, so Campbell now starting out in the top 5 and has now dropped onto the edge of the top 10, so definitely not the start to the race that Campbell would have liked. And Von Duve down in 11th. Might smell a bit of an opportunity here to take a spot inside the top 10, although he is a little bit too far back at the moment to make that happen. So cross over into lap 5 of 22 here in the race 1 of the Monza Sprint. We see the Kiwi pit lane sim racing teammates in Atkinson and Ladaway currently running in 4th and 5th. Of course, KPL team having a brilliant start to the season with a 1st and a 3rd place finish for their 2 respective cars in Nürburgring 250, and that of course has seen them vault to the early lead here in the team's championship. But Atkinson at the moment picking up his share of penalties here early on, and that could see Ladaway jump ahead of him here as he reaches the penalty burn zone. And just a bit further back, of course, we can see that Ward also has a couple of penalties of his own that he's going to need to clear. So it will be interesting to see how the field shapes out as these 2 drivers clear their penalties. So there's Atkinson clearing his, and that'll see Ladaway jump ahead. Waters cleared his penalty, and that is going to give Scott the opportunity to jump into 6th place. as Palmer and Campbell having an almighty battle here for 9th place. Certainly some aggressive driving here early on as Campbell now takes another look. Try and get himself further up the top 10 here in this opening encounter. Looks like Scott has also moved up ahead of both of these cars into 8th now. Very much looking racy early on. As Ward now retakes that 6th spot away from Andrew Scott there. Of course, with the tyre degradation and the fuel burn rates, there is the prospect of pit stops here in this race. There are some drivers who may choose to go for a no-stop strategy here. One of those that could be likely to do so is Scott, who has gained a bit of a reputation here as a bit of a tyre whisperer and certainly knows how to manage a race and get to the end in the fastest possible time. So we just saw him there losing another spot to Palmer, so that could be part of the strategy, as we just saw Green jumping into pit lane. So I believe he's picked up a little bit of damage there and taken the opportunity to make an early pit stop. May cause a bit of a rethink into the race strategy though. So he will have a little bit of work to do. Try and get himself back up the order later on in this race. As we jump back to the front. Hamza's certainly got a point to prove here in round number 2. After the rather unfortunate disconnection in round 1, while he was leading in the early stages. Has put an early DNF next to his name. And a small tally of points in the early stages. He'll be hoping that that one will be his drop round later on. And we'll be hoping that there's not too many more disconnections down the line. As he's certainly out to make sure he claims the maximum points he can here today in the Monza Sprint. He'll be certainly looking for a perfect score of 300 points at this stage. Certainly boost himself back up the order. He has quite a lengthy margin over Pitasso here with 7 laps complete. Pitasso as well, running strongly in second there. Not really too much pressure being applied from Ladaway in these early stages. So you see Ladaway a bit further back from Atkinson in 4th. As we get around the edges or the fringe of the top 5, it is Ward currently occupying that 5th position, but we do have a hard charging Scott just behind. He looks to be making a charge up the order and definitely looks to be aiming for that one-stop strategy, putting in a faster pace, taking on that pit stop and hoping to charge up the field again towards the end. So Scott trying to get a lot of his overtakes done early, get himself as far up the road as possible, and maybe make that job a little bit easier later on in the race to make some more overtakes. But Ward's certainly doing a nice job here of keeping him at bay. There's gaps between Ward, Scott, Palmer, Scott. Certainly all very close between those three, but none of them look like they're going to be challenging for an overtake. It's just on the edge of the top 10. Of course, Ponduve jumping inside the top 10 as a result of Green having that early pit stop. And we just saw Campbell also jumping into the pits as well, so that has promoted Crestdale up into the top 10 as well. So we see Sandwich there. Oh, just had a bit of a moment there. We've definitely caught that at the wrong time. So just got a bit out of control heading out of the exit of Lesmo 2. Just looped it into the barriers there. Not sure if it's taken a lot of damage, but it certainly cost him a bit of time there. Now the likes of Green, Campbell and Westlake will all be approaching him very shortly. Certainly the gap has closed up between Green and Sandwith as Green looks to recover from that early pit stop. This field definitely spread out a bit here. We'll jump up towards the front of the field and right on board with our reigning series champion here in Hunza as he approaches the Lesmos. So there was an onboard lap there with our current race leader, Ridwan Hamza, who's still continuing to build that advantage over the chasing pack here early on in this race. This is a very Lexus dominated chasing pack at the moment, with Patasso, Ladaway and Atkinson all fighting it out for the minor spots on the podium at the moment. Atkinson has closed up but then picked up another penalty again, which he's just served, which has dropped him off the back of Ladaway, so there's a bit of a gap now between Ladaway and Atkinson. as we reach the halfway mark of the race, and Ladaway diving into the pits to complete his pit stop. Lewis also following into pit lane. So fresh set of tyres and fuel for both the Kiwi pit lane drivers. And they both rejoin the circuit just on the back end of the top 10. As we see Green just losing a bit of time there. Obviously carrying a bit of a heavier fuel load. And the tyres being not that much fresher than what the other drivers had at the start of the race, so certainly a little bit of a struggle there early on for Green. Hasn't put him on the ideal strategy, although he has put in the fastest lap last time by. Just shy of dipping into the 1 minute 38s. Maybe we can expect to see a bit more pace coming from Green in comparison to those around him. As our race leader now diving into pit lane for his pit stop. So he makes his stop at the end of lap 12. Just slightly offsetting the strategy a little bit to give himself fresher tyres for the run home. Ward and Scott doing similar here. And that now leaves Nick Patasso in the lead of this race. So at the moment, on the track it is Patasso from Palmer, Hamza who has completed his pit stop, and then the WTC Racing duo of Scott and Von Duve in 4th and 5th. Of course, Patasso's teammate at MSR, Crestal, in 6th. He has yet to make a pit stop as well. And then it's Ladaway Atkinson, who seems to permanently have a half-second penalty over his head at the moment, as he'll be getting rid of that one in just a short moment. I'm sure he'll be resting in bed later on tonight, closing his eyes and seeing that half-second penalty marker burned into his retinas at the moment. I was just about to say, maybe we might see a little bit of a battle here between Palmer and Hamza before maybe Palmer does go into pit lane. But Hamza himself has just picked up a half-second penalty. Of course, quite easy to venture outside of the track limits around here, take a bit too much curb, run a bit too wide. And all of a sudden you're falling foul of the in-game penalty system. So Palmer holding on to second nicely here as Pitasso now pits from the lead of the race. Will Palmer join him in pit lane? Or does he go on for another lap? Looks like Palmer is continuing on to take the lead. As Pitasso grabbing a fresh set of tyres and topping up the fuel tank for the run home. He will rejoin behind Ladaway, who has pulled off the undercut very successfully here to get ahead of Pitasso, with Lewis Atkinson just slightly behind Pitasso as well. So effectively this will be the battle for third place. Atkinson might be left to rue what could have been with a number of those track limits penalties, now resulting in Pitasso rejoining the race just in front of him. So Atkinson definitely needs a good run through these Lesmos as Pitasso gets himself up to speed. Can he do anything on the run to the Ascari chicane? Or will he leave his run for a bit later on, possibly on the run to Curva Parabolica or even on the main straight? Doesn't look like Atkinson is close enough at the moment. Looks like Pitasso now just getting himself up to speed and building a little bit of a margin here. Of course he does rejoin on a bit fresher tyres than the two cars around him. So he will be looking to use that tyre advantage to try and get himself back up into second place. As we just saw Palmer in pit lane, he's rejoining on the track. He comes out in 11th place. And coincidentally, not too far away from a sparring partner from earlier in the race in Matt Campbell. Not sure what happened there. It looked to be a little bit of a glitch. Hopefully Campbell or Palmer didn't cop any damage out of that. They do look to be travelling along fine at the moment. Just ahead of them though, battle for 9th place is picking up here. Scott is currently occupying that 9th position. But Ward showing plenty of pace, putting in his best lap time of the race last time by. Can he close in the gap enough to make a move here on Scott? Will certainly be aiming to stay nice and close to Scott through the Parabolica and get a good draft down this main straight. Certainly looks like he has himself close enough to make a move here. Will he be able to get the job done? He does pull to the right to take the inside line for the first part of this chicane. They do run side by side. Scott just gently running Ward out of room there. And Ward having to yield there to avoid running into the gravel trap on the exit of the first chicane. He now sets himself up for another run. Will he make a move down into the second chicane? Looks like a little bit of contact between the two on the run into the chicane. And Scott there just making a bit of a meal of it through there. And that was the opportunity that Ward needed to get through into 9th place. So Ward up into 9th, building a gap. His next target will be Green, who is some way up the road. So Not sure if that's going to be possible in the next 5.5 laps of this race. As we look further up the order, Von Duve and Pitasso were running side by side into the Curva Parabolica. With Pitasso moving up into 6th place there. So Pitasso very quickly gapping Von Duve there. Now all attention turns to Atkinson in front. So I believe Atkinson has jumped ahead of him here. So we did miss that off screen. And Atkinson now moving ahead of another MSR car. Looks like a bit of contact there. Maybe it could have been a bit of a lag spike there though. As Atkinson certainly doesn't seem to be suffering. And now Pitasso moving ahead of his Mash Spuds Racing teammate Crestale into 5th place as he continues to try and hunt down Atkinson. I think Crestale somewhat understood the assignment there. Well, I won't say definitely yielded very easily to Pitasso, but I think Pitasso definitely knew that if he showed his nose into Lesmo 1 that he would get a bit of an easier path through to overtake and not be delayed quite as much in his attempt to hunt down Atkinson here for what could be the final place on the podium. Of course, we do have Scott running in 2nd at the moment, hasn't made a pit stop, but the trailing 3 cars at the moment all looking very close to him as we are now 4 laps to go here in race number 1 of the Monza Sprint. As Ladaway has now closed up to the back of Scott here. And he gets up the inside into our 2nd chicane here on the circuit. And Ladaway now moves up to 2nd place. And Scott just seeing another position go by. Though he has rolled the dice here to not make a pit stop. And at the moment it is paying dividends regardless of what happens between himself and the 2 cars behind him. It definitely is an advancement on his position from earlier on. He certainly looks to be struggling on those older tyres as Lewis just slips by on the inside of him on the exit of the Parabolica. Matasso following as well. They now run side by side into turn number 1. Matasso getting the job done for now. Atkinson trying to go through the switchback and the double switchback. But Pitasso was well awake to what he was trying to do and just slowed the car up ever so slightly to prevent Atkinson from getting that perfect exit. Atkinson now in the slipstream on the run down to turns 4 and 5. Just not quite enough to get the job done. And now Pitasso picking up a half-second penalty. That is going to be crucial for his chances of a podium. With Atkinson and Scott just close behind. I'd certainly imagine that Atkinson will jump ahead of him as he comes to serve this penalty. Not not sure if Scott will be close enough, but certainly Tasso looking to lose at least one spot here. And even then, Atkinson only just getting ahead of Pitasso into the curve of Parabolica. And this could set Pitasso up nicely for a run down the main straight, as he gets himself firmly planted underneath the rear wing of Atkinson, pulls out of the draft and moves side by side. Will we see a repeat of the previous lap? No, we won't. Atkinson just outbraking Pitasso a bit there into turn one, holding firm on the outside and gaining the ascendancy there through turn two. And now Pitasso looking to go around the outside on the Curva Grande. And now he gets the move done into turns 4 and 5. So Pitasso now back into the podium places, as we are approaching the final lap of this race here. Of course, round number 2 of the 2024 Trackstars Touring Car Series, race number 1 of the Monza Sprint. And this time around, Pitasso is avoiding that half-second penalty and just putting a small gap here on Atkinson through the Ascari chicane. And that could be crucial as we get into the final lap of the race. You can just see in the background there, Scott hasn't disappeared so far, but he is coming under a bit of pressure there from green for the spot in the top 5. Pitasso running really wide there on the exit of Parabolica. It's very fortunate not to pick up a half-second penalty, as we now cross over into the final lap of race number 1. And the podium positions are not quite set yet. Pitasso has 9 more corners left to try and get him the last spot on the podium here in race number 1. Atkinson will certainly be throwing everything at it, and Pitasso has dropped a bit wide there on the exit of the second chicane, and that has given Atkinson an invitation that he definitely couldn't refuse there, as he's quickly jumped into 3rd place. But just as quickly, that was a really poor exit there on the second Lesmo, and he's dropped down into 4th place again, as we better jump up to the race leader as he rounds the Curva Parabolica for the final time. And certainly a perfect way for Ridwan Hamza to bounce back from his DNF in round 1, as he comes across the line to take race number 1 here at the Monza Sprint, with a very handy margin there over Ladderway in 2nd place, who now finally rounds the corner to take the 2nd spot on the podium. And it will be Nick Pitasso taking 3rd place in what was a very entertaining battle there for the final podium spot, as Scott holds on for a spot in the top 5, just ahead of a nice recovery drive there from green. But of course, big congratulations to Hamza for taking out race number 1 here in the Monza Sprint. So we take a look at our race results here for race number 1. It was, of course, Ridwan Hamza taking the race win here by 13 seconds over Ladderway. And then rounding out the podium, of course, was Patasso for Mash Spuds Racing. And then on our first page, of course, Atkinson and Scott taking top 5 results. Green just missing out in 6th place. And then Ward in 7th, Palmer in 8th. And of course, fastest lap there from Hamza with 1:38.7. As we jump over to our second page now. And rounding out top 10, it is Scott in 9th for WRT Motorsport. Campbell, of course, our 10th place finisher. And then we have Crestal, Von Duve, Sandwith and Westlake rounding out our field here. All 14 cars finishing the first race here for the Monza Sprint. So we will quickly take a short break here. Get ourselves set up for race number 2 here for the Monza Sprint, round number 2 of the 2024 Trackstars Touring Car Series. We'll be right back with you shortly for that second race. Welcome back, everyone. And we're just a few short moments away from getting underway for race number 2 here at the Monza Sprint for round 2 of the 2024 Trackstars Touring Car Series. Cars are just lining up on the grid now, and we'll quickly cross over to the starting grid for race number 2. As we have Monza and Ladaway on the front row. And the light sequence is just about to start here for race number 2. So Monza, Ladaway on row 1, Patasso, Lewis on row number 2. And the lights go out and we're underway here for race number 2 of the Monza Sprint. Another great start there from Monza. Ladaway going defensive here against Patasso on the run to turn 1. Patasso trying to get himself to the outside. Bit of contact there between the cars at the front. And Atkinson goes around here and drops to the rear of the field. And now Hunter coming under all sorts of pressure here from Patasso on the run down to turn number 4. As they go side by side, Patasso sensing this is an opportunity to jump into the lead. And he does so. He takes the lead through the second chicane. So Patasso going on the attack very early. Certainly not letting Hamza get settled into the race lead here early on. And it is Patasso jumping out to the early lead here. And already starting to build a bit of a gap here. So great start there from Patasso. Certainly getting the wheels out there. And certainly being very aggressive on the start of the race. And it has paid dividends for the Mash Spuds Racing driver. As we look a little further back, Ward has had a good start as well, up into 3rd place. And then it's Ladaway, Green, Scott, and Palmer rounding out your top 8 at the end of lap 1. So this will be interesting to see how the dynamic of this race plays out. As we see Scott, Palmer and Campbell going 3 wide into turn 1. Recipe for disaster here, and contact between the 3, and Scott there getting caught up in that incident, dropping down to 13th place. So that was not the outcome he was looking for there, and it certainly didn't pay off too well for Campbell as well, who's dropped down the order as well. And a bit of contact there between Campbell and Westlake as it gets very intense here on the edges of the top 10. There's 4 or 5 cars all fighting it out for the minor places here in this race. Scott now being shuffled back into last place here. It looks like he has dropped out of the race there. As we now jump to Patasso, who is in the race lead. Building a handy little buffer there over Hamza early on. Certainly not coming under pressure here in the early stages. And this is giving Patasso a great opportunity just to settle into the lead of this race. And it's certainly throwing a spanner in the works of the plans for Hamza in this race. He certainly would have been expecting to lead from the front. As you just see Ladaway and Ward side by side into turns 1 and 2. Ladaway nicely getting that move done. Plenty of room left between the 2 drivers. It's nice to see a good clean battle there. As Ward now looking to get a run through the Curva Grande. And likewise for Green. And now Green getting a good exit out of that second chicane. Gets the move done into Lesmo 1. So put Green up into the 4th place here. So good start from Ward early on. Saw him up into the podium places on the opening lap, but now he's just dropped down into 5th place. And now he has Scott and Palmer just behind, battling for the 6th spot. And both of those drivers will certainly be looking to gain the edge, try and be the next person to make a challenge on Ward for 5th place. So run side by side down the main straight. Palmer just edging slightly ahead. A little bit of contact there into the chicane. I think that was more network induced than anything, as it doesn't seem to have affected either driver. Maybe Scott slightly with that compromised exit, but certainly Palmer has been able to jump ahead a bit in 6th place. Probably the breathing room he needs to try and push himself a bit further up the order to try and challenge for a top 5 spot, as we now see Scott coming under a bit of pressure there from Von Duve, as they now battle for 7th place here in race number 2 of the Monza Sprint. So Scott just holding onto the spot there. Von Duve definitely within that slipstream area. If he can get himself a good run out of the final corner here, and certainly line himself up for an overtake into turn 1. Certainly doesn't look like a terrible exit. There is a bit of a gap between the two. Can he close down enough into turn 1? Doesn't look like he can do it, so he's going to have to wait another lap here to make the overtake. Meanwhile, Campbell is closing on the back of this battling duo, as he looks to make up some lost ground earlier on in the race. So that 2-car battle certainly turning into a 3-car battle here very shortly. Apologies to everyone there, just had to duck away to deal with an issue quickly, but still managed to follow the action for everyone watching along at home. I did see that Von Duve and Scott did go side by side there briefly, and now it is Campbell and Von Duve battling it out for position 8. Campbell moving ahead of Von Duve, did look to get the move done on Scott into turn number 1. Didn't quite have enough there to get that move completed. But I believe it will only be a matter of time here before the number 12 CP Motorsports Nissan does move up into 7th place, as he's certainly all over the back of Nick Scott here in the number 964 WRT Motorsports Nissan. That said, in the last couple of corners, he just has dropped off a little bit. Could just be that he is setting himself up for a run down onto the main straight. So Campbell there just getting a nice little exit there from the Parabolica. Got himself tucked underneath the rear wing, pulls out of the draft and moves side by side there with Scott. And certainly a textbook overtake there to move up into 7th place. Just running a little bit wide there on the exit. Could offer the opportunity for Scott to make a move back down into the second chicane, but I don't think he's going to quite have enough pace there to mount an attack here. Scott just getting a little bit of a poor exit there, and that actually probably compromised Von Duve a bit more than anyone else. Oh, Scott getting all out of control on the exit of Lesmo 1. And now Von Duve finally gets ahead of Scott, but in the grand scheme of things hasn't really gained a position out of it, as he did lose one to Atkinson just a few moments ago, so still comes out of the battle in position number 9. Just the alternative of a different car sitting in 8th place now. So we are 7 laps complete here. The back half of the field now just crossing over the start-finish line to start lap number 8. We'll jump up to the lead duo at the moment. Pitasso just is actually growing that margin here in the opening stages of the race. So he is putting in a brilliant performance here up against the defending Trackstars Touring Car Series champion. Pitasso has certainly found some form here in the Monza Sprint and is now leading the race, looking for victory here in race number 2, and to spoil the party of Ridwan Hamza, who would have been looking for a perfect haul of 300 points here tonight to really get his 2024 Trackstars Touring Car Series title campaign back on track here after the DNF in round 1. But at this stage, Pitasso could be trying to minimise the amount of points that Hamza does score, as he is certainly doing a fine job out here in the lead of the race, as Hamza served that penalty that he had hovering over the top of his car just a few moments ago, and now coming under a bit of pressure here from Green in the battle for second place. So Hamza has responded to that setback with the fastest first sector of this lap, and has just put a little bit of a gap between himself and Green. Of course, do have to make note of the fact that Green has also jumped ladderway here while we're off this screen following another battle. So Green last time around did pick up the fastest lap of the race. So certainly chose a fine time to turn up the pace here, as Hamza was picking up a penalty. So a bit of an somewhat even spread between the first four cars here. Pitasso's lead probably just a little bit bigger than the gaps between the rest of the cars at the moment. But I would say Hamza is closing in just a little bit here as we probably approach our first pit stops of the race. As we just drop a little bit further down the order. Ward and Palmer having their own little battle here for 5th place. Palmer certainly does look close enough to try and mount an attack here for a spot inside the top 5. Certainly at the moment looks like one of the closest battles on track. Possibly the only other exception being the battle we can see in the background between Campbell and Atkinson. As Palmer using as much of the track as he possibly can here in an attempt to get a move done on Ward. As we just see Hamza and Green making their move into pit lane, likewise for Ward and Palmer as well. So Hamza making a tyre change here, topping up the fuel tank here for the run towards the finish line. This will be a very crucial stop. Can he perform the undercut here on Pitasso and try and reclaim the lead? Only time will tell with that one. Green coming out of the pits in 7th, Ward in 8th, Palmer also coming out the pits, and we have some reports that he has picked up some damage here with his pit stop. Certainly does sound like he is a bit off the pace here, so it could be some damage to the engine that is restricting his power at the moment. As we'll jump back to the race leader. So Nick Pitasso, will he come into the pit lane this time around and try and cover that undercut from Hamza? As he does look to dive to the inside line, so he is heading towards pit lane. So the Mash Spuds Racing number 32 Lexus in pit lane, followed by Ladderway in the number 44. So Pitasso going forward, a tyre change. Atkinson staying out on track, likewise for Von Duve, so they will take 1st and 2nd place. But more crucially here, who is going to come out in front between Pitasso and Hamza? And it looks like Pitasso has got plenty of a gap here. So he has successfully covered that undercut. And you could say at the moment is effectively in the lead of this race, as we have crossed past the halfway point. Of course, it remains to be seen what Atkinson and Von Duve will do. Will they choose to push on to the end of the race? And if they can make it to the end without stopping, do they have enough to hold off the likes of Pitasso and Hamza, who will be coming at them very quickly? So there we see Palmer now all the way down to 13th. It looks like he has taken the second pit stop there to repair the damage. Extremely unfortunate for Palmer there. Left him well down the order. So he will have a lot of work to do to try and recover some points. As we now see Von Duve assuming the lead of this race. As Atkinson heads to pit lane. So Atkinson heading out of the pits. He has managed to build a bit of a gap there over Campbell, who there was a little bit of a battle with earlier on. As we saw in the background a few laps ago. So Atkinson certainly gaining a huge chunk of time over Campbell in the pit stop. Now with slightly fresher tyres than that of his competitors in front, I'm sure Atkinson will turn his sights towards making a push towards a top 5 result. So we'll just slowly make our way towards the front of the field. So Green and Ladaway in a battle for 4th and 5th at the moment. And then Hamza, probably the closest he has been to Patasso at the moment. They go side by side through Parabolica. Von Duve in the pits at the moment. This could be the battle for the lead, which it will be now. So Hamza getting the slipstream. Moves side by side with Patasso on the run to turn 1. Who is it going to be? Who will be leading out of turn 2? Patasso just forceful enough without pushing the limits too much. And he will hold on to the race lead here. But that was certainly the first of what could be many opportunities for Hamza to take the lead of this race. After a brilliant start to the race from Patasso, a bit of a comfortable lead there between himself and Hamza. Now Hamza has closed the gap into Patasso and is really starting to ramp up the pressure here in the fight for the race win. And just in the background as well, you can see Green and Ladaway also fighting it out for the final spot on the podium. And who knows, maybe it could potentially even be a race win if things go pear-shaped between Patasso and Hamza. Not that that is what we'd like to see, but certainly if anything goes wrong, either Green or Ladaway could be there to pick up the scraps. As we have seen that Ladaway has just dropped behind Green, so Green now taking 3rd place here in race number 2 of the Monza Sprint. Definitely looks like the gap between Hamza and Patasso not quite enough for an overtake, so we'll follow a bit closer with this battle for 3rd place. Oh, and then, now I'm not sure if there was a bit of contact there, but Green has definitely spun around there on the exit of turn 2 and now dropped down the order into 6th place at the moment. And that promotes Atkinson into 5th, Ward into 4th, and of course Ladaway into 3rd place. So now, unfortunately, that battle that we were hyping up as maybe a potential race win battle if things fell their way, now has gone the way of Ladaway. And he is now left on his own there in 3rd place. Certainly not something I think you'd complain too much about here. As we just see the battle for the race lead probably has died off a little bit, but certainly cannot discount or take Hamza out of this fight here just yet. He has fallen back a little bit. As Patasso there just crossed the line to set a new fastest lap here in this race. He's certainly responding to the advances made by Hamza, putting in his own fastest lap, looking to build that margin again between himself and the Nissan driver. But Hamza certainly is not going anywhere at the moment. Looked like a little bit of a glitch moment, but certainly don't think there was anything really significant in that. As you see, Patasso out on top of the curb, using every bit of track he can possibly get to make sure that Hamza stays behind him in closing stages of this race. It is lap 16 of 22. Next time by, it will be 6 laps left in this second race. You just see Patasso just a little bit more of a gap here. So he has certainly found some speed in the last couple of laps. And now it'll be interesting to see what kind of response does Hamza have here in the closing stages of the second race. Certainly been a long time between drinks for Patasso. I believe 2021 was his last race victory in the Trackstars Touring Car Series, so certainly been a long time for Patasso outside or off of the top step of the podium, at least in the Touring Car Series. And at the moment he's doing just enough to make sure that he will be returning to the winners list here today at Monza. Of course, there still is a long way to go in this race. Anything can happen. I can safely say this race is certainly not done until you cross the line and grab the checkered flag. But at the moment, Patasso is certainly doing all the right things he needs to do. Hamza certainly not having the effect that he has had from the lead of the race. In race number 1, he was able to get the lead and drive away with it. This time he certainly hasn't had it all his own way. As Patasso grabbing the early lead has certainly put what would have been his ultimate plan on the back burner a bit. He's had to find another way to get the win, if it is going to come at all. So Ladaway just a bit further back in third place. Then we have Atkinson and Ward there in the battle for 4th and 5th. And then Green and Von Duve 6th and 7th. Campbell in 8th. But But it is still Pitasso leading the way here, as the laps do wind down here in race number 2. Pitasso certainly punching in those low 1 minute 39 laps, where at that time he was a little bit slower. Certainly the lap before, 1:39.095. We've just seen Hamza close up a little bit there into the first chicane. And we do see in the foreground a bit there, the teammates of Hamza in Ryan Palmer there in 12th place, about to go a lap down. Hopefully, for the sake of this race, he doesn't make things too complicated. Recognises that there is a very big and important battle going on at the moment. We certainly wouldn't like to see it interfered in any way in the closing stages. Certainly at the moment he is doing his best to stay out of the way of both drivers. I'd have to say the distance ahead is certainly not affecting them at the moment. But I'm sure when it does come to it, that Palmer will obey the blue flags and not impede either driver and let them resume their battle for the race win. So I think Pitasso has just built a bit of margin there this time around, as Palmer definitely recognising the battle that was going on behind him, has moved aside and let both of these drivers through. So Pitasso has gone purple in that first sector. He's certainly pushing hard to keep Hamza at bay here in the closing laps. 3 laps to go. Round 2 of the 2024 Trackstars Touring Car Series. Race 2 of the Monza Sprint. And it is Pitasso leading the way from Hamza as we approach the Ascari chicane. With 3 laps to go. Oh, a bit of a bobble there from Pitasso. And he's getting all sorts of out of control. And that has just killed all of the momentum he's had. And Hamza now sweeps ahead into first place here, with just a bit over 2 laps to go here in the race. Hamza will round Parabolica, cross the start finish line, and it is 2 laps to go. And unfortunately for Pitasso, he has also picked up a half a second penalty as well, just to rub salt further into the wound at the moment. Hamza just taking a bit of a wide exit there. That was definitely not ideal, and has allowed Pitasso to range up to the back of Hamza here. But of course, he does have that half second penalty, so it could all be for naught if he does make a move ahead. And I think Pitasso has recognised that, just sort of sat back a little bit. He doesn't want to compromise. Oh, he's got another bad exit and he's gone spinning here. So it just goes from bad to worse for Pitasso here in the closing stages of the race. What looks set to be a much needed race victory for Pitasso. to end that long wait for another victory here in the Trackstars Touring Car Series. And he now is at risk of falling off the podium as he comes to serve his penalty with Atkinson right behind him. So Atkinson is going to sweep past into third place here as we do approach the final lap of the race. So it was certainly a very impressive drive for Patasso until the last couple of laps, where it has all gone pear-shaped for him. Of course, he will still come inside the top 5, barring any other mishaps here on the final lap. But the misfortune of Patasso has been the good fortune here of Ridwan Hamza, our defending Trackstars Touring Car Series champion, carrying the number 1 on the ITS FR Racing Nissan as he rounds the Scurry chicane for the final time on the run to Curve Parabolica. And this will be the perfect way for Hamza to bounce back from the bad run at the Nürburgring 250 as he comes across the line. The headlights are flashing from Hamza. He comes across the finish line for a clean sweep of the Monza Sprint. Ridwan Hamza wins race 2 here at Monza. Justin Ladaway comes across the line in second, and then it's Lewis Atkinson in third. Nick Patasso fourth, just missing out on the podium. Some very bad luck there to him. But it is Hamza who is victorious here today at Monza. A clean sweep of the Monza Sprint and 300 crucial points added to the championship tally for his title defence. So we'll take a quick rundown of the full race results here. And it is Hamza, of course, taking a narrow victory over Justin Ladaway. And of course, it is a Kiwi Pit Lane Sim Racing 2-3, with both of their drivers taking the minor places on the podium, with Atkinson in third place. Another good point stay for them in the team's championship. Then we have Patasso, our early leader, unfortunately dropping down to fourth at the end. And then it's Ward rounding out the top 5 in 5th place. And then at the end of our first page of the results, it's green in 6th for CP Motorsports. Von Duve ending up being the sole representative for WTC Racing in 7th. And then green's CP Motorsports teammate in Campbell jumping back up to 8th place by the end of this second race. And then over onto page 2, Scott for WRT in 9th place. Rounding out the top 10 was Crestdale from Aspuds Racing. And then just outside the top 10 was Sandwith in 11th in the second WRT Motorsport entry. Palmer finishing a lap down, but crucially finishing to pick up some points in 12th place. And then, of course, it is Westlake and Scott, who unfortunately didn't finish the race here today, or our second race at least. And then, fastest lap of the race going to green for CP Motorsports with a 1:38.705. So jump over to our round results for round 2 of the Trackstars Touring Cars Series for 2024 here at the Monza Sprint. It is, of course, Hamza taking the round win with 300 points. And then Ladaway second for the round with 270. Patasso winning the tiebreaker courtesy of his high qualifying position over Atkinson in fourth place. And then we have Ward and Green separated by a point. And then 3 points separating the remaining drivers in the top 10. Campbell and Scott tied on 216. Von Duve 1 point further back. And then Palmer 2 points further back, just inside the top 10. And over to our Drivers' Championship at the end of round 2. It is Ladaway for Kiwi Pit Lane Sim Racing jumping into the championship lead on 520 points. Green for CP Motorsports just 22 points further back. Patasso sitting in third. And then we have Ward Campbell inside the top 5. Palmer just outside in 6th place. Then Von Duve, Scott, Crestdale and Sandwith rounding out your top 10 in the drivers' points after round number 2. And then finally, our team's championship. It is Kiwi Pit Lane Sim Racing getting off to a strong start in the team's championship. And a 111 point lead at the moment over CP Motorsports, with Match Spuds Racing 180 back. WRT Motorsport sits in 4th at the moment. MC Motorsport rounding out the top 5, although they are tied on points with WTC Racing. And there is just 2 points further back to It's FR Racing at the bottom of the table, who is certainly mounting a comeback charge here after the low point score in round 1. So the strong results from Hamza helping them claw back some ground in that battle. And certainly the last 3 teams are very close on points, and we could see the points standings jumble around a bit next time out in our 3rd round at Sardinia for the Sardinia 250. Of course, it will be a brand new circuit on the Trackstars Touring Car Series calendar, certainly providing a bit of extra excitement for the 10th anniversary season of the championship, as while we see a number of returning circuits to the calendar, we will have a new circuit as well join the mix, certainly adding a bit of variety to this year's championship. So stay tuned to the Trackstars Racing Series YouTube channel. Of course, make sure to like this video, subscribe, ring the bell to get your notifications for when our next video is coming up, so you can follow along the action. Hopefully it'll be with you very shortly as we bring you round 3 action from Sardinia Road Track A, as all 3 tiers of the Touring Car Series, the TS3 Touring Cars, the TS2 Touring Cars, and of course the Trackstars Touring Car Series, all head to Sardinia for round number 3 of the series. Of course, it is the 2nd round for both TS2 and TS3, and round number 3 for the main series. But until then, thanks for joining us here for the coverage of the Monza Sprint. It has been a pleasure to be with you. My name's Jarvan Dalitz, bringing you commentary tonight, and we look forward to seeing you for our next broadcast of the Trackstars Touring Car Series.